The Goldspotted Oak Borer is an invasive species that destroys California oak woodlands if left unchecked. UC wildlife biologist Dr. Tom Scott and certified arborist Bret Hutchinson have partnered to develop a toolkit of early detection, monitoring, and best treatment practices to save the greatest number of oak trees at the least cost. Here's how they perform tree inspections to create a treatment plan before bug emergence in the spring.
That one's got some problems.
When we're talking about tree inspections and trying to figure out if trees within the forest have GSOB, there are basically four that stand out: crown thinning, lesions, woodpecker foraging, and D-shaped exit holes. Crown thinning is the loss of canopy in the upper crown, and usually that happens as a result of drought stress. While GSOB is active and feeding on the cambium and phloem layer, it is shutting off the sugar supply, which is supposed to be feeding the roots, and the roots then begin to suffer and they don't absorb water, and that will lead to a crown thinning effect similar to drought stress. The next one you'd be looking for would be D-shaped exit holes. D-shaped exit holes, if they're found on the trunk, it gives you an indication that that tree has already had an entire life cycle of gold-spotted oak borer that has gone through it. The other thing you'll find is the foraging from woodpeckers. That's evident in areas of the bark that have been excavated, if you will, by the woodpeckers, where they are searching for the larvae while they are in the hibernation chambers out near the outer bark. The last symptoms that you look for are lesions, and sometimes these lesions are very small. It looks like a very small wet spot or a spot where the tree has been oozing and leaking. Those lesions are usually associated with the initial entry of the larva after the egg hatches in the early spring and summer. Those are four main things that you're looking for when you're inspecting trees, and you can evaluate trees based on the level of these symptoms, and that can give you a pretty good prediction of the density of active GSOB, in a really good indication of where you need to spray and what areas you need to focus on. So when you go up to the tree, you're going to first start off with basically a chisel, and you skim off the very outer, about 1/8 inch thick edge of the bark, and you search for the hibernating larvae that are in their pupation chambers during the winter. And so you chisel out a square that is approximately 6 inches by 6 inches, where you shave off that material on the outer cuticle of the bark and expose any pupation chambers that are there. If you find at least one larva, then it's also would still be considered low levels. But if you start getting to where in that 6-inch area you're finding 2 or 3 larvae, that would be a moderately infested tree. And if you find more than 2 or 3, that would be a very highly infested tree, what I call smoking hot. And that's a tree that is going to release a significant number of insects that next spring. If you don't take care of it, one large, highly infested tree could release hundreds and hundreds of fully developed GSOB beetles that next spring. And then those beetles will obviously fly up and feed and mate and start the whole cycle over again. Here's another one. This one is still basically in hibernation mode. It's still in the folded horseshoe shape. So this one would probably still be at least 4 weeks. You know, it hasn't even really started shortening or changing or pupating in any way yet. But either way, we still like to do that to them. It's a very important thing to understand what your density is in these trees, so you know where your hot spots are and how hot they are. Because when you start talking about spraying, you're going to initially try to focus on, obviously, your hot spots, where the trees that you've actually identified GSOB in would be your number one priority. And then as far as setting up a buffer zone around those trees, generally you would spray the hot area plus kind of donut-shaped area around the hot area, even if those trees aren't showing signs of GSOB, because you're creating this encapsulation area. You're trying to keep those beetles from spreading out, and also those trees on the outer peripheral may have low levels active right now. Just the signs may be so slight that you can't truly identify active larvae, but there could be some there. So the idea is to spray everything in that area So you just have complete knockout and the beetles don't have any place to go.